Hello and welcome to the Wolf Den podcast. I'm your host Nako, joined by my co-host Zenitsu. And this week we'll be discussing recent tournament postings from the Carta Magica event from this past weekend, as well as the further EX2 meta and how it is developed. So I guess it'd be most beneficial for those that aren't aware. There should be a link in the description, but Zenitsu, why don't you just shotgun out like the top 16 that we're going to be talking about today?
So the top 16 is, well, just kind of more of what we've been seeing with a little bit of an upshake. So first place was green hybrids. We'll get into a deeper dive on green hybrids in just a moment. Don't worry. I know green finally won a big event in a while. We've been saying green has been bad, but shocker, it's not. It could still perform. But anyway, second place was Imperial. Third place was Blue Hybrid. Fourth place was Imperial. Fifth place was also Imperial. Sixth place was Mastimon. Seventh place was also Mastimon. Eighth place was Imperial. Ninth place was Blue Hybrid. 10th place was Mastimon. 11th place was Yellow Hybrid. 12th place was Yellow Hybrid with a splash of red. 13th place was DNA Armor Rush. 14th place was Mastimon, 15th place was DNA Armor Rush, and 16th was Blue Hybrid. So we had a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We had like 6, 7, 8 decks representing in top 16, which is pretty good. Just as a side note, the majority of them are blue and yellow in some capacity. So that is definitely something noteworthy that blue and yellow is still performing above and beyond the vast majority of the other colors, with the exception of the upset of green hybrids taking the W in Carta Magica.
So, um, I like Zenitsu said, we have been trashing on green. It's basically a staple of every episode when we cover cards that are good or cover archetypes where like the Gargamon line from EX2, my explanation for tiering it poorly was just TLDR green bad. But clearly it won the event and um while um I definitely am surprised, I guess. I want to start with that. I would not have made Green to be a top contender for this event, as my statements in the past episodes have been fairly obvious about. I'm not hiding that fact. Um, and but I think this is a really good example of something that um, we can discuss kind of like on the grader for the card game and like the meta as a whole. And that's, I guess, variance, if not um just dedication, maybe. Like, so I'm not familiar with the player. I'm not familiar with how often they have played Green Hybrid. I'm not familiar with whether they just picked it up or whether they just came up with a super spicy list. Um, but looking at the list, it's not doing anything too crazy. It's just Green Hybrid updated for EX2 slightly to include 4 copies of the new Terriermon, um, fairly beneficial to the deck,
Calamon.
and 2 Kali. Yeah, I was gonna 2 copies of Kalimon and 4 copies of the new Terriermon. But that is actually it. So, um, it's not doing anything too crazy. Um, it's basically just running Green Hybrid with um an entirely Terriermon and like support rookie lineup of rookies at least. Um, so you're either a Terriermon or a white Digimon that you don't Digivolve in Raising, so that they can still play the pocket rapid strategy that Yellow Hybrids kind of has popularized. Um, Running 3 copies of Rapidmon to Digivolve for that reduced cost. Um, but outside of that, it's not doing anything too crazy. Um, it has a pretty diverse level 6 lineup, I guess. Zenitsu, where
I
do you
mean,
want to?
Shivamon's pretty standard. I kind of covered green hybrids in BT8. Obviously, the Rapid Montech was good there. It's still good here, as you mentioned. just because it's like pocket out of raising easy control. Um, and the fact that we actually have Terriermons make it good. But Shivamon being an insectoid makes it so that Rhino Kabuterimon can play it easier. And then the anti-meta tech is Argamon level 6 from BT5 to try to hose on other tamer based strategies, which there's a lot of decks that use tamers and want to have them suspend for various benefits and abilities.
I noticed it while you were talking. It also runs Gummymon as its primary egg, which is fairly relevant as well. Once for t
Gummymon right now is just Green's best draw egg, and that was part of Green's problem for a while, is they had
They don't draw.
awful, awful card
they
draw.
didn't green is the
So
yeah, but
what does Gummymon do?
when an opponent's Digimon is
Oh, when its
suspended
opponents become suspended. Yeah, that's super
on your
easy
turn,
for
but
yes.
still,
It's still pretty
because
easy for Green to do.
metal metal suspends,
And
um,
rapid suspends. And then
rapid
you have Sam
suspends,
Desanti.
suspends. Yeah, there's a lot of suspending going on. Um,
The big thing that I want to highlight is for from this deck is the blockers. So previously blockers were just like kind of gone on the lower levels. If it's not a level 6 blocker, it was just kind of seen as bad. Level 5 blockers are a little bit more acceptable, but most of the time the level 5 slot is super competitive. But with the flexibility of green hybrids not really being an incomplete package, but just having room to actually play these types of cards, makes it very flexible and customizable. So they're running 2 copies of the starter deck Kabuterimon blocker, 1 to Evo 5K, just pretty solid. I'm guessing this was just used against a lot of green decks to just kind of, hey, you can't attack with your Vmon or X Vmon, and if you're thinking about trading with your um, Ragermon or Lydramon, sure, go ahead, do it. So it's just in there, it seems like, to stop some of those early aggression decks, especially since we saw a lot of decks adopting for yellow hybrids, Red Splash with the Guilmon. So this just also blocks those Guilmons. So I think that was a really good meta call. And just 2 copies of Cherrymon as the level 5 blocker, just because you really aren't running any other level 5s, so just to have another one that's just so happens to be a blocker that just so happens to cost a little bit less than your average level 3 is also pretty good.
yeah, I mean, Cherrymon's one of those cards where its niche and its ability have kind of been pretty irrelevant for a while, mostly because it's not super splashy, it's not super fancy. But it was a staple green card and has been a staple green card for a long time because back in the days of decks just being, whatever the newest mega was and then generic good stuff along the 3, 4, 5 lines, Cherrymon fit right in there because it just being a 2 cost level 5 was cheaper for its rate on average, and it being a 7k blocker meant it blocked pretty much anything that it wanted to below the level 6 threshold.
And that's kind of still super relevant. Like, granted, certain decks can easily get over that and don't really care. But something like yellow hybrids, if they don't have a mega, that Cherrymon's just going to sit there and stop basically any form of aggression. A lot of red decks, if they're trying to aggress with their lower level Digimon for some extra card draw, this can block those as well. Um, Obviously, the big one is blue, considering blue is just such a dominating force in the meta. This just stops them. I don't think like blockers are particularly bad. It's just obviously the higher stages you go with your blockers, the better the blocker can actually be at, utilizing the mechanic. But the big spice is kind of something I wasn't really expecting was Calamon. Like, I knew Calamon in green was absolutely cracked. When I was messing around with Mega Gargamon, I was looking at Calamon as like one of the best cards in the entire deck, just because it helps you not only gain memory when you Evo, it helps draw, and because you're playing Terriermon, it only costs 1 to evolve into. So, like, the fact that Boko in combination with Calamon is very, very scary because you're just gaining so much momentum, literally just for evolving, which usually should cost momentum. So, like, it's the combination between the two spinning passively on the field that could create a very easy steamroll situation where you could just go from literally rookie to level 6 in with basically no memory. It's crazy. And I think that's what Green kind of wanted to do all along. And this was like one of the first decks that actually allows it to do it very quickly and efficiently.
I think the lower level blockers too definitely facilitate Calumet a little bit, only because a lot of the things that want to swing over Calumet that you're not wasting by swinging over Calumet, like things that basically wouldn't be swinging otherwise, are pretty hard stonewalled by a level 4 blocker, even at 5k. Because again, you're not going to trade off a Lydramon, even like an Armor Purge, just to attempt to swing at a Calumet. Um, but the developers have been playing with um, like this kind of effect for a while now. Like we saw it first on uh, the White Tamer Takumi Aiba, and just kind of this cheap white splashable thing that can make your deck draw a little better. Um, Basically giving you one extra draw per turn. It also has the added benefit of giving it 3000 DP, for which for a deck that, as green does, suspends the opponent's Digimon, gives you a decent amount of board control, allowing you to trade up usually. Um, Again, giving something like Cherrymon 10k or Rhino 11 is pretty relevant at the 5K mark, and if you do happen to get all the way up to a 6K, you can just straight swing your 6K over their 6K. Um,
I mean, it also in combination with JP just makes your evolution free into any of your hybrids.
hmm,
So like there's also that aspect to it where it's just like, okay, I get to suspend Calamon, Digivolve into Metal Kabuterimon, suspend your dude, and be over it for 9k with with piercing is just really, really good. The card that actually surprises me the most is the Duo Tamer Izzy and Mimi. Green Hybrids hasn't really used that card a whole lot in the past. They've usually opted for a more cheaper and efficient tamer like Izzy from the starter deck, just because you're already trying to suspend the opponent's Digimon down. So it kind of just makes sense to get a little bit of extra momentum and tempo. You're not actually trying to use Izzy and Mimi's secondary ability. It just seems like it's in here for passive memory gain, which isn't irrelevant at all. And sometimes that could actually swing things into your favor since you have such efficient evolutions.
so, I mean, I ran my green hybrid list, I want to say, 1.5 times at locals exclusively, um, and it was the Christmas version, but um, I did run the Dual Tamer Izzy and Mimi only because I did think it was good at the time. So, and I'm pretty sure I didn't have another one of the other green tamers they were using primarily, but so I had been running them
I
since the
mean, like
start.
you
But
could kind of do some like cheesy things with like Rhino swing trigger Izzy and Mimi before Rhino to see if you could just get a free evolution, and then if you don't, then boom, you have a planned one anyway. So it's not like it's awful.
well, I'm struggling to. When did it come out? BT6? The dual
Yeah, it
tamer.
came out BT. No, it came out BT5. I thought. Yeah, BT5.
Jeez, forever ago. Um,
I know, but like the extra momentum that that 2 memory can give really could mean a lot, especially with how fast green can
well, yeah,
move.
like I
And I
mean,
think this optimizes how fast green can move very, very well.
it's well, I was gonna say the least represented dual tamer, but I guess technically probably the Ty and Matt dual tamer is the least represented now because it only really saw play in like the BT5 version of security control that was basically just Omnimon Megazoo. But um, so the
I think it's
Izzy,
because it's a white tamer and it's only really interacting with Omnimons
I just
to
forgot
do
it existed.
anything.
I was gonna just say that the green one was the least represented one because everything else basically sees like decently consistent play, but so do all the rest of the colors see more decently consistent play. But just starting your turn at 5, regardless of color, is strong. So this no different in green. And if opponent has a suspended Digimon, gain 2 memory. Um, and so you may Digivolve. Okay, I was gonna say that because I wanted to read the text to make sure that you didn't accidentally Digivolve into the wrong thing if you had um, the correct level 6 in hand, but it does say you may, so you can look at the top, choose not to Digivolve, and then tuck, and then Digivolve from hand anyway. Um,
Yeah,
which
that's
is
kind of
pretty
what I
good.
was getting at.
So,
And the fact that like Calamon synergizes with Shivamon, you have Digizorption with Argamon in case you build a new stack to synergize with Shivamon. Shivamon is actually still like really, really good of a card because a lot of removal right now is not Digimon based, it's option based.
hmm
And by that I mean it's coming from options.
yeah.
Um so like shutting out the opponent's ability to interact with your Digimon just make green even better because oh, now you can't kill my Digimon? Cool. Let me just gain extra in even more value on top of whatever I already was doing and I already had set up.
So,
So Shivamon's super good.
yeah. Uh, Shivamon is a great card, and in any other color would see significantly like higher win rates and probably higher play. Um, it's just that so yeah, green hybrids with a little bit of extra stuff, enough to push it over the edge. Decidedly a better deck than it was last set. Which is actually pretty good because you really can't say that. For a lot of archetypes as of EX2, they're not necessarily any better, even if they're different. Um,
Right, because the new Terriermon, just to like encapsulate some other aspects of the deck, the new green Terriermon is basically like BT8 Gamamon, except you gain a memory, so it makes playing your tamers even more efficient.
mm,
So like and then the old Terriermon is just the memory blocker. People were running it anyway because it was the memory blocker. And now you actually have Terriermon based synergy that makes it even better, especially in green. And then the last card that we kind of didn't talk about, obviously it's playing Mimi. Mimi's just the best green tamer there is.
yeah,
And green memory boost just for a little bit of extra consistency.
yeah. I was gonna say I'm pretty sure most people are familiar with like the staples of green hybrid. I was mostly just gonna talk about what was different, but the so as much as we're talking it up and we're gushing here, obviously this deck did very well. I wish I had match data because that's something that we don't have access to. I could maybe rip through the stream VOD and see. Um, there was no top cut, right? So they didn't
No, there's no
necessarily.
top cut.
They never usually do, but so they didn't necessarily play Imperial last round. They could have played any of these, probably any of the top 8, I would say, could have potentially played against them in the final round. Um, so we don't know exactly the matchups here, but I guess what I'm alluding to is just that Green Hybrid won an event. Does that mean Green Hybrid's the best deck of the format? God no. Still not even close. Not even I would still not even put it as a tier 1 deck. Um and but you know, somewhat contradictory. It won an event. How is it not a tier 1 deck? And that's because um the meta is not a, a prison. It's not a stone wall where you can have tier 1.5, tier 2 decks do well. That's kind of what they mean. That's kind of what the tier system represents, like basically like tier 2 I would put as like a, you know, once in a blue moon if the stars align, can this win? Yes. And the tier 3 I guess would be more so along the lines of like if the stars align and you sacrifice a goat, then maybe you can make a top 16. But tier 2 decks can decidedly top when piloted well and when they get lucky because honestly, like green hybrids doesn't win an event completely topping an event top 32. I bet money on it all day just by pilot alone, but the luck gets you to the first place.
Luck is definitely part of it. Build is another part. Matchups is another part. Like, there's a whole bunch of various factors that go into like how a deck could perform to excel to get to these top placings. And I've seen the pilot Russell on Facebook quite often. I haven't really engaged with him that much, but I have seen him be very active. So I think he is a solid player and he just probably had a really good meta call and that Metacall helped accelerate him to uh, take this placing that he ended up getting. But that doesn't necessarily mean that just because he got there, other people who are running the same thing could get there as well. Like, usually what happens is something like this tops, everyone wants to try it, everyone jumps on this bandwagon, and then all of a sudden it stops seeing success. Not necessarily because it wasn't good to begin with, but other people might not be as good as Russell on playing the deck. He's the one who built it in its current iteration, and he understands it probably the best out of any person outside of whatever circle of players that he's playing with. So somebody just carbon copying and saying, okay, this is going to win me the event, that's very unlikely of happening. And that's just the reality of the situation.
Yeah.
But it's cool that he won, and I'm happy that he won because Green really needed a W outside of being a splash color in Imperial, because I don't consider that to be green.
Yeah, honestly, I'm glad that we've had like a rogue deck win an event, especially like it being the Ultimate Cup event, like um an event that is, as we've mentioned in the past somewhat, like it is technically less competitive only because you don't qualify for nationals. There's no rankings, associated with winning this besides prestige and the prizing. But nonetheless, it's still a very difficult event to win, very difficult event to top, period. And the fact that Green won is pretty cool. But as Anitsu mentioned, uh, if anyone were to just like see this and say, "Man, I really want to play Green Hybrid now," you're kind of gonna have a bad time. I would say it would be a decent amount because you probably do need to understand the intricacies of the decks. The This player is clearly very dedicated. They've played this deck a decent amount, and you don't just luck your way to winning these things, especially with a deck like Green Hybrid. Um, so if anyone is thinking about picking it up and playing it, you're probably just gonna lose, or at least just not see near the level of success that this player saw. I would suggest that they'd probably have to play it for a while. And also, I would presume that if you're someone who's going to pick up Green Hybrid because it won this event, you're not someone who's going to play this deck for more than one event because you'll probably lose and then you'll drop it and you'll move on to whatever
Well,
wins the next event.
I mean, like, somebody can still take this list and do somewhat well, because I do think, like, looking at the list, it actually does have some solid matchups. I think D Reapers hard loses to this every day. Like, if D Reapers can't establish, um, and they have already very little to no interaction with the opponent's cards, um, Green just gets to do whatever it wants, and then it just suspends, kills, controls, and chips away until the opponent literally can't do anything.
well,
Their color splash is completely irrelevant because of Shivamon. Like, I think it's a
well,
really good deck to face against D Reapers, and I think the more specific thing it was designed to try to like counter or solve against is Imperial, just because Imperial is a very strong deck, as we can see in the top 16. It represents 4 out of the top 16, so it's still a very powerful deck. I guess you could technically extend it a little bit to armor, just because they're playing with very similar concepts. So about we'll just round it up to 6 out of the top 16. It just kind of beats. Um, and I think it also does well against security based decks because you could just passively chip at the opponent's security and burn them with like Shivamon and Ancient Beetlemon. So like it's just a deck that seems like it's in a really good position, but it does seem like against other matchups like Red, it would have a very, very hard time with, because like nothing it does stops anything Red would do. It's just like, okay, Red, swing, kill Calamon, kill you this, kill that, kill that. And then they're just left with nothing, and they have to try to piecemeal their way to something salvageable.
so a couple points. I would like to stress that like this, it's still tier 1.5, tier 2 deck at best, or I guess tier 1.5 at best, tier 2 deck most likely. Um, it is, yes, it is probably as a positive win rate versus D Reaper. I don't discontinue this. I wish I had more data to accentuate my point, but how many D Reaper
Oh,
do you
I
see in
played
the?
against it at locals.
Okay.
me on D Reaper, them on this deck, and it seemed like against D Reaper they win more often than not.
So continuing my point, I wish I had more data to accentuate the point, but how many D Reaper in the top 16?
0.
How many are in top 32? We don't know that. Probably zero.
We don't know, but
Um,
like Gallant is also absent. Beelzemon is also absent. Like,
all
there's
decks
just a
that are
lot of
bad.
decks.
There's a lot of bad decks that aren't here. Um,
They're
so,
not necessarily bad. They're
but
just
they're
in that
not
tier
here.
two like
Yeah,
range where it's like they
the
have good matchups
yeah,
and the bad
that's the Blue
matchups.
Moon range where maybe next weekend we'll be talking about how Gallantmon won an event with uh crap. I wish I remembered his name because I watched the stream a little bit. The sealed only Gallantmon deck. Maybe that'll win an event. Probably not, but it could. Um, so um, but you played 9 rounds of this event. How many D Reapers did you play?
I played one,
Okay, so on average.
and it was midway when I was about, I want to say, with at least one loss under my belt. Midway
So
is when I saw D Reapers,
I mean, 1 out of 9 rounds,
and for
roughly 10%. Not exactly. That's not 10 rounds. So that means they were on average, assuming everyone had your ratios, which it really doesn't. It's taking a lot of liberties with the numbers here just to accentuate the point. That means on average there were 50 players out of 500 that were playing D Reaper. So congratulations, Green Hybrid, you can beat the bottom 10% of players. Um, but um, So I would never pick up this deck due to its like singular D Reaper matchup. A lot of decks have good D Reaper matchups. All of these decks have good D Reaper matchups, or at least have things they can do in the D Reaper matchups, which is why they're here and D Reaper's not. So, um, D Reaper
well, they
obviously,
also have good matchups against everything across the board. D Reapers
exactly.
have some very negative matchups. Like
Yeah.
Gred was our design. Like Gallantmon was
Where's
specifically
Red here, by the
designed
way?
to
You
try
keep.
to beat out
I
D
don't see
Reapers.
Red here either.
I mean,
I would
yeah,
say,
that's just because Red's card draw is pretty bad, and even though Gallantmon has probably the best card draw of any Red deck, a lot of it is unsafe card draw because it asks your Digimon to swing, and the benefits to swinging is to try to get the card draw to see the cards that you need, not to be in the cards that you need to see more cards that you need. So that's kind of where like red starts to fall off with its card draw, compared to blue, where it's like, okay, I swing with um, jamming Vmon, get a card draw. Jamming Vmon's going to live that security check. I swing with Guilmon, get 2 card draws. That Guilmon's going to live through that security check more often than not. So there's a huge distinct difference in just the level of card quality and card draw that they're seeing. It's like, yes, Gallimon saw more cards, but he lost his Digimon.
hmm, so um,
So that's just a quick example on like why red kind of struggles, and especially in this type of a format where it seems like consistency is king. Um, that is super important.
I mean, I don't think that's anything new or shocking that consistency is king. Consistency has kind of always been king, and the decks that were more consistent would win more on average. Um, you did have a small amount of window of time where, when Jesmon was a more popular deck, when you could high roll with Jesmon, and there have been people that have high rolled with Ancient OTK, and that's why like I would put Ancient OTK almost in the basket of that Rookie Rush previously occupied and that Armor Rush kind of struggles to occupy currently, only because it's a deck that it's a consistency check. It's a consistency wall to the meta that on any given round you can go up against someone who will basically ask the question of your deck and your hand, how bad is your worst hand? And if it's bad enough to where you lose, you fall out of favor in the meta. And if your worst hand isn't that bad or is recoverable via your security or via um, just drawing cards through various effects, Mastamon has one of the best searchers in the game. What's also one of the best transition engines in the game, in the form of the yellow purple Gatomon. Um, it has some great security bombs. Imperial kind of only needs 1.5 pieces to get going, and then once it's going, it draws a shit ton of cards. Blue Hybrid is just consistency and a stick, and that's really what these decks that are doing well consistently, the ones that we talk about week to week, are still doing. So Green Hybrid, not in that camp. Green Hybrid struggles with card draw, struggles with a lot of matchups, but can win and did this time. But that's, I guess, the point of what we're trying to say is that it won this time. Will it win next time? No, probably not. Will it win the time
There's a
after
high
that?
chance it won't.
There's a high chance it never will again. Honestly, I would bet money that it doesn't win again. At least green hybrids specifically. I would say maybe like, but yeah, but hybrids is the best engine to facilitate Shiva, and Shiva is the best card green has, or the best win condition green currently has. So that, I mean, unless you want to count Imperial as half green, you could run a purple. You
I'm
could run a
not
green.
counting Imperial.
You could run a green-based Imperial deck technically. Um,
No, 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 no. You're not doing that.
so yeah, that's that's the meta. That's why, and it really does speak that you people really need to like. Um, I feel like there's a lot of like fickleness and flavor of the month in Digimon as a whole, especially like the competitive scene where players will play a deck for maybe one event, maybe only play the first 3 rounds, lose 3 rounds or 2 rounds, 2 losses and a tie, and then drop the deck wholesale. I feel like I talk to a lot of players that do that, and it's just, while the decks aren't super, super hard, they still require some amount of matchup knowledge, and that's really what you're missing out by not sticking with things. And even with decks that only survive in popularity or in the competitive meta for like one format at a time. So what Mastamon's not going anywhere, Imperial's not going anywhere, Yellow Hybrid's not going anywhere. So it really should reward players for playing it for more than an event, more than maybe 2 events, but like, you know, do a little bit of exploring at the beginning of a meta, sample some things, maybe try something new, but ultimately kind of pick something. I've stuck with Yellow Hybrid since the start of BT 8. It's the first deck I built, and the only deck I've played at any competitive event thus far. I still have other decks that are fun. I still have other decks that I've played casually, but the only deck I've ever even remotely attempted to pilot at a competitive level since BT8 is Yellow Hybrid, because it rewards dedication. It rewards understanding your deck, and hopefully I can beat, some flavor of the month Randys that decide they want to play Yellow Hybrid just because it won the previous event.
And my competitive deck, anyone who's been following me, I'm a filthy blue player. I have been playing Imperial. So I've even noticed in just my own performance that I've been getting slightly better and better with each passing event. This event I didn't do super hot in. I went 6-3 after all 9 rounds, placed like 81st, which isn't like terrible, but it's not like bad either. It still puts me in that upper what, fifth percent of a lot of the upper 10% of a lot of players, which is like nothing to scoff at a like 500-person tournament. It's like, even though yes, I didn't win, um it's still, I generally as a player like to see improvement in myself, and I noticed I did the more I played Imperial. And usually when I go into big events, even if I don't win, I usually want to try to be at a positive where I have a good win loss record. So being 6-3 to me is very, very good. I could have theoretically done a little bit better, made some misplays here and there, but that's what playing the deck and understanding it and doing some testing and tweaking really rewards. And I think Digimon like Nako said, is a game that rewards that dedication, that rewards skillful play over just base level play.
Yeah, it's just um yeah, just as we do have some decks that are flash in the pan, only relevant for one meta, um flavor of the month kinds of decks, BT7 saw um a lot of hybrid decks come up and you don't see them to the same level anymore because a lot of people moved on. Um a lot of those blue hybrid players are Imperial players now because it blue
I
hybrid
mean,
just didn't scratch that same itch.
there's still blue hybrid players, but it does play differently than most other blue decks. It's not like multi-swing hyper aggressive, it's more tempo control, which is something a lot of blue players don't really care for. But it's cool that that style of deck exists within blue. Which I could say the same about a lot of the other colors. But that's to each their own.
I mean, what I mostly my mostly point is that like blue was at one point what 60% of the meta, 60% of toppings, more specifically, probably potentially like slightly less, but at least probably 50% of the total player base was blue hybrid. Where the hell did they go? Because they're not playing blue hybrid anymore.
Well,
Um,
some of them are, but just
not
not as
not
high in numbers
50% of them.
because
That's what I'm saying. Where
yeah,
did those
because
players
they
go?
shifted off of it.
They disappeared. They're playing blue. They're playing Imperial because I would even um no, yeah, I mean it's probably just Imperial because Imperial Blue Hybrid together is still probably 50% of the meta if I had to guess. Um, though that may also be due to the ease of access of the Imperial deck because it was primarily a starter deck.
Yeah,
Um,
accessibility is usually a big thing that leads into more widespread play, which usually contributes to a little bit more representation. That also contributes into like how a meta is shaped and defined. And we've kind of gone over that in the past, where it's just like, oh, just as a quick recap, the more accessible a deck is, the more people are going to play it. So the reason why there's not probably as many Mastimon players versus Imperial players, even though they're both tier 1 decks that both come from a starter deck, is the fully upgraded version of Mastimon is way more expensive than Imperial could even hope to be, even at max rarity. Well, I guess now max rarity with Imperial because of all of these event promos, that's something different. But just base rarity alone, Mastimon is way more expensive than Imperial.
it's also significantly harder to pilot. I mean,
It also is a lot harder to pilot.
it's this it's this format's equivalent to loop. It's it is basically the not it is well as yellow purple. It is the purple deck of the format. Honestly, it is more purple than yellow. I mean, it even runs purple memory boost over yellow memory boost. So, um, just the idea that anyone that wants to pick up and play a deck, they're not like there's a lot of factors keeping them from playing Mastamon. Well, at competitive tables, it's almost a format staple. Like we have players that are decent, that are clearly skilled enough, clearly dedicated enough, and when you get to that point, cost is no option. You know, these are all adults with this being their hobby, so most of them have them decently foiled out anyway. Because usually when
Yeah,
you have
because
this level of dedication to a deck, especially a deck, um, like I guess Mastamon has, where um, the people that have the, or at least had the pieces laying around, were people that had played decks of that caliber before, such as Security Control, um, or Lilith Loop, and they're the kind of already the players I would describe as people who would max out the rarity of a deck only because, or at least go for like the foiled bling copies of cards, um, just because I don't know, I get that vibe.
yeah, but we're I think with like BT7, we're actually entering this era where decks are surviving more than a format. And I
Thank
think that's
God.
like yeah, I think that's a good thing just because I've been on the record and saying this before. a lot of the earlier sets were just building up the foundations, and now that those foundations are built, they're expanding upon them, thus keeping cards and decks relevant. So, like going into the next format, Mastodon is still a deck, Imperial is still a deck, Yellow Hybrids is still a deck, technically Blue Hybrids is still a deck. Like, there's just a lot of very playable decks that are extending from all the way back as BT7. Um, Even technically, the bonds are still somewhat playable. It's just they don't have the representation and experimentation that all of these newer decks have. But I've seen in Japanese results, hybrids and bonds and you name it, kind of still creep up, and we still have cards even all the way back from BT1, like War Greymon, that just when it gets support, it looks like it's going to be a very good deck. And that extends to the Black War Greymon deck that is getting even more support in BT9. So, like, we have all of these foundations that are finally getting built on, so we don't always have to scrap our deck for the newest thing. And that also contributes to how metas are played, is because usually at the beginning of the format is when people are generally the most experimental, and that rewards more aggressive players who are comfortable with their deck, to be able to beat the unknown or the slightly known in our case. And that helps them perform a little bit better. And then sometimes they tend to flounder a little bit towards the mid as things settle out and get figured out.
Um, yeah, that's a good point. Like, just I've been asking for decks to stick around for a while now because I am someone who likes to bling out their decks with foils when, especially if the card's important to the deck. Um, I know X Antibody being one of my favorite sets of alt arts, kind of period. Um, but I've struggled to because I just don't see a lot of point in it. It's not that I couldn't, it's just that I do want some amount of return on investment here as far as like at least length of time. Like I remember even going all the way back to when I played green and I was debating whether I should grab the alt art or the regular art Saraspons. And then I just looked at lists from BT4 and BT5. Nobody played Sarasmon anymore. Sarasmon only existed for the format where it was the newest mega. And so, why would I bother investing in an alt art for a card that only exists for one set? You know? So, but now we're starting to get cards that stick around. Black War Greymon, Oriyumon, Shivamon. Cards that have alt arts that also exist for more than 2 months. And it,
And
it
that's
seems
not
to
to
only be
say, like,
continuing that way.
yeah, and I definitely like that direction. I'm a person who's base bear almost every single step of the way. I always sell my alt arts just to try to offset the cost, because usually I buy a case, and then uh, the alt arts, being where the vast majority of the money is, help recoup some of that, I guess, in quotation marks, loss. It's not really a loss. What I like to do with a lot of my bulk is hand it out to people at locals just to help them play the game. But that's just my position, and I'm lucky enough to be in that position. So any way that I can help break even, or just to even make a little bit, or just make that loss a little bit less of a loss, usually is what I go for. So that's why I started up a whole TCG player account, is to try to get some money back for what I paid for out of a case. And it might sound silly because, singles is the best way to purchase Digimon. It just is. It's more economic and efficient, but I also like having the fun um, opening packs.
So, yeah, just in general, I'm enjoying the fact that cards are sticking around. Blue Hybrids is still a deck. You can. What are you gonna foil out in that deck? Strabimon? Are you running for Strabimon? Uh,
Um,
probably not. I don't know.
it's mostly the tamers, but like Davis doesn't have the alt yet. You
You're not running
could run.
Koji because he's bad.
Yeah, no, you're not running Koji. You could bling out Tommy. You could bling out Sora and Joe.
Um,
There's not a whole lot to bling out in that
I
deck,
mean,
but
that's
still.
also one of the benefits of that deck is that it's like mostly commons and uncommons with like the most of its like expensive cards being rares. Um,
Yeah, Davis is easily that deck's most expensive card because you don't even need the most expensive blue Digitama Upamon. Um, well,
no,
unless you're running the Leomon variant,
you use
which some
Kieramon.
are, and it's not bad. I will tell you that straight up, it's
Okay,
not bad. I lost to
wait a
it.
minute.
Um,
Let's see.
the
Okay,
none of the blue hybrids were using the Leomon variant,
point
but
made. Thank you. Didn't even have to make it. Worse than regular blue hybrid confirmed.
it's not that it's worse. It's just
It
doing
just
different
loses to
things.
the ones that didn't change their deck since 2 months ago.
Well, I mean, the thing with the Leomon package is it is kind of unnecessary, but like it doesn't harm the deck because similar to like most other hybrid decks, you just have room to play around with. So like the whole key thing, and I made a deck profile about it, is you're trying to abuse Jerry and Starlight Velocity. So it's just like you use Jerry, play a Leomon for free, Digivolve on top of Jerry, then Starlight Velocity out Jerry to play another Leomon for free. And then all of the Leomons are great aggro slash defensive tools because their on delete abilities can help either take tempo away from the opponent or gain you extra tempo on your turn. So they have their own sets of utility. Like they're not bad by any stretch of the word. It's just they're unnecessary.
TLDR, if you're watching a video on how to upgrade blue hybrids for EX2, you've already lost. Um, but the yeah, just the fact that decks stay around makes like at least encourages me to invest in them more. Um, I was just
Well, we
telling
also yeah,
Zenitsu.
we also see that with the secondary market, like cards are starting to hold prices a little bit better because they're sticking around. So, like, usually the trend is card gets announced in Japanese meta, then early adopters will buy it up, card price goes up, then it'll go back down, and then it'll go back up again once the card actually comes out in English.
Hmm.
So that
And
trend
then
is
yeah,
tried and true.
I guess the best portion of the market, at least for North American players, is that you can get a little bit of a discount if it's something you definitely want to play, regardless of how good it may be. Um, like looking forward, you can buy into it, and you'll probably get it a little cheaper, or I mean, at least a decent a bit cheaper than on release. But um, there's I think for the majority of people, by the time they've looked into it, and usually it's again for all you like flavor of the month Andy's out there, it's after it's won an event. That's the worst time to buy. Um, just looking at Rapidmon specifically, there's a look, BT8 comes out, Rapidmon shoots way up, and then crashes, and then probably wins an event and goes way back up, and then it dips a little bit, and now it's on the increase still. Mostly probably because it's not the newest set anymore. It's not getting opened as much, and therefore the price is going to tend to the top a little bit. But
I'd say that's pretty accurate of an assessment because like everyone was like complaining about Beelzemon.
well, look,
Because he's a fun deck. He's a good deck. Um, he's that tier 2 rogue area where he can perform. It just requires a little bit more specific pilot and matchups in order to help him with his overall performance. But that card, Beelzemon, I believe was as low as like 15-20 bucks at
yeah,
one point.
let's look at
And
so Beelzemon. Well, so I mean, a little bit of just like general market talk here. Anyone that isn't super familiar with the Digimon market, prices are kind of set. 1.0, 1.5 being slight exceptions because they were printed to different levels. Um, so
they were the first sets.
yeah, so they were printed less. Beelzemon being a 1.0,
Yeah,
1.5,
it's
yeah.
1.0 secret
Beelzemon,
rare.
so 1.0 Secret Rare is basically as bad as it could get as far as old cards are concerned, unless you're a rare, because you need more of them. But I think they need four of this Beelzemon anyway. Um,
It's usually like 2 to 3 of that
so
because once you see one Beelzemon, you see them all. in a sense
Um,
because you just reuse it with all of your trash gaining effects.
but yeah, as Anita said, we can go back as far as a year because this card has existed that long, over that long, and if you bought it in November of 2021, you could have got it for as cheap as almost $10. It was 11.65 at its lowest point. Um, and then it went up a little bit. I think maybe I would also argue that that is potentially just due to the whole card game market being down, it being the holidays, so people weren't really spending money on cards. Um, and it being BT5, the format from hell as far as at least November was concerned, because seemed like it would never end. Um, so people were buying fewer cards, but it then recovered to roughly the quote unquote like kind of standard price, like a secret rare from 1.0. $30 sounds pretty fair to me. Like just eyeballing a number, if I had to guess, it was kind of it bounces, but it just then starts to upward trend. You can kind of tell when it got announced, the EX2 announced in Japan, and now it's at $42. So if you bought it 6 months ago, you could have had four for that price, basically.
And this is kind of why I generally like buying a case, is because I get a playset of every single card. Only exception was BT7. I don't know what was up with that set. That set was really weird, but I digress. And I'm basically set for literally anything. The only time I ever broke my rule was because of like just the hotness of 1.0 and 1.5. I think I oversold on my Lilithmons, and now I'm trying to find them back. But now that Lilithmon is not being played, she's not super popular anymore. Her deck is just okay. Her price is starting to go down, so now I'm thinking about picking one up just because her price is down. There's no attention, and I don't know exactly how low she's going to go, but I know what price I'm more comfortable with playing her. And I didn't feel like paying 20, $30 for a Lilithmon, especially now knowing that her deck is non existent in the grand scheme of the meta. Um, I think like maybe now that $10, $15 is a little bit more reasonable of a pickup. I'm still waiting, obviously, for it to go a little bit lower, but it being a 1.0 super still makes it a little bit hard to find in a booster box. So I think you just have to kind of gauge what set it's from, what are your odds of pulling it, and then what is the card doing, and what could the card potentially be doing.
Yeah, so that's Zenitsu Wisdom, the second instance for this episode of if you want to buy cards, just buy a case. Don't buy singles, don't buy boxes, just case or nothing.
I'm definitely not condoning that. Not everyone can
Well,
afford a
it's
case.
that's kind of what you
Whenever,
said. You're like, hey, if
well,
you wanna have
I'm
play
saying
sets of
that's
every
why
card, just buy a case. I mean,
that's why I buy a case is
for
because
most
like
sets,
so
it's probably
I
still cheaper to buy buy four of every card would still be cheaper than buying a case, not including alt arts.
yes. But I like buying a case partially because I already mentioned it. The bulk. I give bulk out to newer players to help them get into the game. And I also don't have to search for extra copies of cards that I don't necessarily think I have. It's like, oh, I know I have extra Terrier Mons. Whoop, there they are. But not everyone can afford a case. Um,
Well, yeah,
is
but but I guess that's what I'm saying is that if you're someone who is not looking to collect, you are exclusively looking to play the card game, and you want play sets of every card, even then, buying a case, I think, like buying a case for having extras and for um, being able to potentially, get your cards for cheaper and or for free if you like really high roll on some alt arts or um, stuff like that. Like there are plenty of reasons to buy cases. I mean, also just the fun of opening because I overbuy too. I'm not gonna pretend that I'm someone that only buys singles. I buy boxes, but I just don't buy a case. Only because I deal with whatever small amount of variance that I deal with, and then some pick up and or trade for some pieces that I don't have four ofs. Like I'm still missing one Black War Greymon. I bought it for $5. You know, so instead of me buying, what, six more boxes I would have needed for a case, seven more boxes for a case, I bought a $5 card. Um, but I don't always get that lucky. My biggest example being recently with BT7, I only bought 4 or 5 boxes, and I didn't get a single Lucemon Chaos Mode. At the time, I didn't care because I wasn't going to use it. And now that I want to play Masty a little bit, I had to bite the bullet and buy 2 cards at $30 a piece. So, um, that's the high and the low end of it. So, if you're someone who does just want to buy a because they do box EVs. They're not super hard to do. For Digimon, you could, I mean, I've looked up in the past how the magic boxes are calculated, and the effective value of a box, or expected value is of a box is less than the price of the box, almost decidedly. And unless the box is super oversold, you're almost definitely paying more for the box than the cards inside the box at the time of release.
I can say with the utmost certainty, yes, the box EV is lower than the price of a booster box in most cases. I think looking at like buying cases and selling and being a more active participant in the secondary market on the seller side, I haven't made money back on a set or had the ability to make money back on a set since BT4. BT4 was the last set I was profitable on, with keeping cards myself, like play sets of cards. Um, BT5 was a huge bloodbath. I'm not going to go over numbers on how much I lost because that doesn't necessarily matter.
And no one
But the point
cares.
is, yeah, nobody cares. But I haven't been profitable on opening excessive amounts of product and being able to sell that and keep stuff myself.
Well,
If I
so
sold everything, I might get lucky sometimes and break even. Like I think BT8 I could have technically broke even if I sold everything. But then I would be left with nothing and then what's the point? Cuz I'm a player, I want to also play the game that I'm investing into or buying into.
yeah. So I mean, I'd never make the point that someone should profit off of these. Like, while there is technically a chance based on like because the even the alt art uh pull rates at the case level are pretty standard, right? It's like what, 1 to 2 per case of each alt art
Which card?
of each of
Uh,
alt arts. Like isn't it more fixed at I don't deal with case ratios, so as far as I'm
Case
concerned,
ratios with alt arts, the only thing consistent is secret rare alt arts, and usually that's one per case.
okay.
Fun fact, that is usually one per case. BT8 was my only real exception where I had two Lucimon alt arts, but I pulled like literally no Susanos, which scared the ever living crap out of me because I'm like, oh, I'm guaranteed to see these because I've only bought in cases multiple times before, and then I didn't see any. I think BT4 was also another exception, but that's just because there was three secrets. So you were guaranteed at least two secret alt arts in that case
I think
from when I opened it.
that's actually kind of hilarious, only because I have beaten that ratio with my 4 or 5 boxes every set. Like straight up every set. I bought 5 boxes of BT7 and I got one alt art no, two alt art Susanos and
I said
no K.
BT7 was kind of the exception. Like that set was weird.
Well,
Something was
that's what I'm
100%
saying.
different about that set.
Well, I bought 5 boxes of BT4. I got 3 alt arts, 3 alt art secrets, 2 Lucimon and 1 Ancient Greymon. I got BT5. What's BT5 secrets? Like,
Usually you get one alt art of each of the secrets per case.
well, that's what I mean. So I'm at
Usually.
that ratio with less than half of that. So
Yeah, I mean,
I'm high
you
rolling.
just get lucky.
So yeah,
Sometimes you just get
I
lucky.
had one alt art defeat and one alt art X antibody in that set. Like so, um, yeah, like and that was also the set with 3 different alt arts of Omnimon, 4 alt arts of Omnimon. I'm sorry, Jesus. Um,
Yeah, but while we're on the topic, fun fact, usually with secrets, you only get about a playset of each of the secrets. Obviously
including
some
alt
sets will
arts
vary.
or no?
Um, you no, it's usually one alt art and then a playset of the secret. The only time that hasn't really been true is again BT4 because that set was weird. And then BT7 because again that set was also weird, and extra sets because they're they function completely differently than normal sets. I will say that. Because out of my case of EX2, I pulled exactly a playset including the secret. So like this is where secrets actually start to become more valuable than some of the other cards because their pull rate is harder. So like Beelzemon
As long as they're
Blast Mode,
playable, because a
yeah,
lot of them are hot garbage.
yeah, like Beelzemon Blast Mode as an example, that secret is harder to pull than most other secrets in the game because it actually has a lower pull rate. Like out of a full case, I only saw 4 total copies between normal art and alt art. Usually on average I see about 5. So that one less spread across tens upon thousands of cases, like it adds up to a slight shortage compared to a lot of other secrets.
So, again, just comparative example. I bought 5 boxes, 3 secrets, 2 of them being alt arts, one blast mode and one Gallantmon. So there are also more alt arts in EX, so I mean it's a little bit different. But
Yeah, EX sets are really, really, really different. Like,
uh,
I don't want to compare apples to oranges as much as I possibly can. I'm just saying because, like, I think I pulled 2 alt art machine Dramons, and then almost I think I pulled like 6. Yeah, I pulled 6 machine Dramons themselves. So that kind of equates to the same type of ratios that I was seeing um, with the stuff from EX2. It's just the difference was there was one super versus or one secret versus 2 secrets.
so I guess cycling back to the topic at hand, what I was mostly saying is no one expected the most people to, unless you're like a legit scalper slash investor only, not playing the card game. You're just buying cases to sell off the pieces and try and profit off of, or you're a card store, I guess. But I know my card store basically doesn't do singles for that reason. Is that the effective value, the expected value of the boxes is lower than the price of the boxes themselves. But um, for most people, the goal I would imagine is to just break even or reduce the cost of the case itself. So you get all of your playsets, you get um, all your pieces, you get extra pieces of the lower rarities that you can then trade or give away depending on their value specifically, and then with the hope of it not being as expensive as you had sat down and just bought every single card in its base rarity from TCG Player, um, which is also kind of my goal of buying a couple boxes, is that hopefully, while I don't get everything I want, with between the alt arts and the extras, I can trade and or negotiate my way to play sets of the cards I care about.
Yeah, like I was just doing a fun thought experiment earlier this morning actually, where I was just like, my store has 1.5 boxes for a reasonable price. What's the best that I can pull out of that set? And like I was going to buy the boxes for let's just say around 70, 80 bucks. The best I would pull out of like all of the hot cards would only be about $50.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
like that just goes to show that like even though there's some very valuable cards like Davis, there's Vmon, Lady Devimon, like Black War Greymon, like the sum of all of them at best case scenario, if that doesn't equate to more than what the box is, then the box is just not really worth it from a seller standpoint.
I mean,
Obviously casuals will be casuals, they want to buy boxes, collect the cards and do all that stuff. I do that all
I think
too.
casuals just buy
But
like loose packs too. That's something I haven't found myself doing in a long time. I don't buy loose packs anymore.
No,
Especially like
I think the worst thing you could possibly do monetarily is buy loose packs.
it's I mean, as a kid it was fun and it was way more within my price range. I used to do it with Yu-Gi-Oh! I would usually like go to my locals on a Saturday afternoon and then buy like a pack or two depending upon if I did well enough, then I would get store credit and just use that store credit on a pack or two. Um and but for Digimon, it's so bad because even if you hit a super, if you don't hit the right super, like you're just not getting anything for it. So I'm just using BT8 as an example because it's not like as we said, BT8 is part of like the pseudo new era, the pseudo like sustainability era, I guess we'll call it, where these cards aren't just immediately replaced by better cards in a different archetype in the next format. And the best pull you could get out of a BT8 box at the moment is an Alt-Art Magnamon at $45. Um, I mean, I guess combining it with the second, so your high roll is still worth it at an Alt Art Magnamon and an Alt Art Ophanimon Fall Down mode, being 38, 39 ish. So, that's closer to $70 from two cards alone, not counting the rest of the supers and not counting the secrets, because both of those are just, I guess, if you got two Alt Arts, you wouldn't get any secrets then, so never mind.
Correct. If you get
So,
two alt arts, you will not get a secret.
but those are still worth more than anything else, so you'd be better off. But, um, your chance of low rolling is just significantly higher. And as a result of that, a brand new box of BT8, according to TCG Player at the moment, is only $57, which makes sense because unless you're pulling like the real high end, like, and I'm talking like top five alt arts, like even like we get to the sixth most expensive alt art is Flame Dramon, and that's only $20. Creepymon is 19. So um, you're really struggling here.
And like the supers, they're holding somewhat well. But like usually when I go into like calculating if a box is worth it, I'll look at like the super. I won't necessarily look at the secrets and the alt arts, because you never know which ones you're gonna get. Most of the time, I'll actually look at the supers and below to see what is valuable in that to make up for the high rolliness. So that's why I was looking at 1.5 was because um, Vemon, Lady Devimon, and Davis, they're all rares. So there's a very high likelihood I would see at least one copy of each of those in a single booster box, just because of how booster boxes kind of work. Um, I know the supers in that set aren't really worth a whole lot, and neither of their alt art versions. So, like, it just kind of made the set kind of not really worth me wanting to get more of. And if I wanted more copies of those cards, I was just better off buying the singles.
Yeah, yeah, especially like the first couple sets, 1.0, 1.5, they really struggle at the higher rarities because I mean the way Digimons has been printed and I guess will continue to be printed is that you have your face monsters, your boss monsters are your supers and your secrets, and those are the cards that have been almost wholly replaced. Like I just do any of these see any play. Craniumon is like the only thing that like is stretching. We don't play the original Mastamon anymore. We I think the original Malamyotis is played in the Malamyotis deck, but that's again,
Yeah, he's like a two of at best.
so we're stretching to
Actually, some people are thinking about transitioning to Malomyotis, the new one, and Beelzemon, just because like they don't feel like paying $40 for the old one, and like he's still a mill based deck, so there still could be some synergy there to
like
have like a reoccurring level 6 body.
yeah, your supers are really struggling. The game shows its age at least in card design. Like super rare of Shine Greymon. Yikes.
Yeah, but like looking at BT8, one of the newer sets, it's like looking at their supers, it's like you have Rapidmon, which is like $10. That's
That's
not
that's standard price for a
that's
super though.
yeah, that's
Like
that's decent.
Well, we live in the
Actually, I would
era.
say the standard price. I would say the standard price is actually $3 for a super.
Uh, I mean,
Yes.
average
I
price
I mapped it
probably.
out before, and it was like $3 for a super and 15 for a secret.
Average price, I would
Yeah.
say, but a competitive playable super, because I don't think
Oh, 100%. Like,
at the
because it can be used
time.
in multiple different decks.
Well, yeah, I mean that's the flexibility of Rapidmon specifically. I'm saying like even something
And
as
that's why
competitive,
Chimeramon's 13 is because he's even more playable for more decks.
but
And that playability increases the demand, which then dictates a higher
I
price.
mean, so because I remember when cards were like impossible to get and super expensive, and this is like mostly like pre BT5. It definitely started because BT5, remember specifically, BT5 came out and I only had three Lord Nightmon, and I knew I wanted to play Lord Nightmon in the first event of that
It was up to Yeah, it was up to BT4 that cards were rather hard to get, which is
and
why I
really
was actually
expensive.
able to make money, was because the cards were harder to get.
That was also when like I couldn't rely on my LGS to just supply me as much of cards as I wanted to buy because they only had a limited supply. But yeah, I was going to an event and it was like decent ways out of the way. It was a larger local event. It was a 64 player in-person event in BT5, like very beginning of BT5. And so in the first weekend, so I think it came out on a Friday and it was a Saturday tournament. I had to drive an hour and 15 minutes south of where I live, and I was like on the TO's Facebook page messaging people at stoplights trying to find somebody that could trade me or that I could buy a Lord Nightmon off of them because I was driving down with a Lord Nightmon deck that only had three Lord Nightmon. And I was panicking because I was going to get there. I'd never been to this tournament. I've never been to this area of that state. And uh, I was really just afraid that I would get there and have no time to like find one. And I ended up getting lucky because when I got there, there were a couple people that were also from my locals that recognized me, and one of them just legit lent me a Lord Nightmon for the event so that I didn't have to worry about like how much it cost and if like do you want cash or do you want to trade and blah blah blah. Like they're like, here's a Lord Nightmon, and I used it for the event, and then afterwards, I'm pretty sure I bought it for $10, which was I thought was a steal at the time, but it maintained basically that price for a while, which is why I wanted to use like as my example. Like $10 is Lord Nightmare was like $10 for like all of BT5 basically, and a little bit of BT6 I want to say.
I mean, yeah, that's just normal market fluctuation. While the card is in demand, then it's gonna naturally warrant a higher price. But also one thing that we kind of haven't really talked about while we're on the whole market thing is like chases. So I think sets with a very, very, very high chase absolutely crushes the price of everything else below it. Because like with BT6, we had the Ghost Rare Omnimon, and that set was opened to high heavens, and as a result, it made almost the entire set as a whole worthless outside of that one card.
Um, yeah, I definitely saw that BT6. It was also, I think it was a couple of market factors converging at once because it was a the the Chase Omni meant that like even like LGSs were opening packs. I know mine did. I know um, a couple people near me, uh, people who traditionally don't necessarily buy cases, all bought cases um, in the attempt to stretch for that Ghost Omni. Also, um, the market factor of it was the first release set of full availability, at least at my local level. And so when we showed up to the BT6 pre-release and our like the guy that is always behind the counter at our tournaments, he asked us like how many boxes you want, and then I remember asking how many can I have, and he said how many do you want? Like, I could buy as many as I want, and it was the first time I had zero cap. I could have, I don't know exactly how many cases they had behind the counter, but I could have bought cases, plural, individually. Um, and that had never been a thing. I had basically always bought as much as I could, always potentially even wanting more, because I was restricted to 2 boxes per set per store, of which there are two locals near me. So I bought 4 boxes, and that was the most I could buy for BT4.
I still only bought my one case because I'm not rich.
I mean, one case, but I wasn't even given the choice to buy a case because I didn't pre-order like 12 months in advance and sacrifice my third-born child.
Yeah, I'm done with pre-ordering in advance. I've officially swapped out of the place that I've been buying from. Um, they're fine. They're functional. I hate waiting 2 months to get my stuff, especially sometimes when we get into these like summer and winter seasons with the extra sets that are shoved in between normal set release schedules. It makes products feel very tight because they kind of are. And waiting 2 months for my case just means that I don't get to play that set.
Yeah, yeah, 2 months is a set. That's really ridiculous. Like I my the reason I buy boxes, I mean, besides that I find it kind of fun, like opening packs in any card game is fun. Being able to like to sift through all the new cards, even like the commons and uncommons, at least just to physically see them a little bit is cool. Um, but it's mostly for access because I always know now with my LGS being fortunate enough as I am, I can on any like so EX2. I it came out. I went to my LGS and Friday afternoon, and I said, "Hey, can I have 5 boxes?" And then I sat there and I opened them up, and I had a deck built to play with right then and there because I bought enough boxes to where I could build complete decks. And like I said, the only thing that I'd only pulled 3 Rapidmon, and then I traded for one. So I had I prioritized my Rapidmon. I sleeved up my yellow hybrid, and I had a match right then and there. Um, of EX2, I was BTA Rapidmon, but like I could play with D Reapers right then and there from just opening the 4 boxes of EX the three that I or EX2 that I bought.
Yeah, I mean, the market is, I think it's in a good spot now, and it looks to be continuing to be in a good spot. I know we don't really usually talk a whole lot on the market of things, but right now, with the development of EX2 meta, we're just kind of in this period where it's just like it is literally BT8 uh, 2.0,
Hmm.
just extra cards and extra things added into it. Not saying that it's not fun, it's just
I have no problems with BT8, honestly. Like
yeah, I don't have any
I
problems
don't
with it
think any
either.
one deck is too oppressive. I don't think any one deck is like uncounterable. And honestly, it is really still. I'm still counting my blessings in BT8 at least because we're coming off the heels of EX1 and BT7 where I could not say that. I could say that if we had gotten further delays or if the meta wasn't significantly shaken up with the arrival of new cards, if it was just the same decks getting modified as opposed to new decks entering the format, I probably would be less positive about the card game as I am right now, only because the if it was just like blue hybrid mirrors amongst all the top tables or Gabuban mirrors as it was for EX1, that wasn't fun to me. It really wasn't because I just didn't want to play Gabubond, and I knew I was worse off for not playing Gabubond because the best thing to play into Gabubond was Gabubond, and the best thing to play into Blue Hybrids was Blue Hybrids. So now
Yeah,
that's just not true. Like I think Yellow Hybrid has a really good Imperial matchup, but it doesn't necessarily have as great of like a Red OTK or a Mastamon matchup, and then like there's rock paper scissors. There's at least contention, and you're not just seeing the same deck occupy all of the top tables.
and looking at Japanese data, like I don't like to harp on it and rely on it super much just because they play the game differently
You've
and their
only
metas are
mentioned it
different than
3 times
ours.
this
But
episode.
Yeah, but to wrap things up, the game is in a really good position, both meta wise and monetarily wise. And just because something was successful once doesn't mean you necessarily have to copy it. You could try to copy its success, and if you have your own success with it, then more power to you. But I definitely think that the game as a whole is in a very good state, and we'll just see how BT9 is going to, if it's going to continue this trend or if there's going to be another big shakeup.
Yeah. Um, pretty well put. The this is BT8 too. Um, BT9's not too far away, honestly. What like I guess to the chagrin of some people. Um, I think we should be talking about that shortly. If not next week, then the week after, definitely. Um, but just like keep doing what you're doing. Don't necessarily need to shake anything up now. Um, especially um if you're someone who does want to like try and learn one of these BT8 decks because they're not really going anywhere. They may not be as successful. I know a lot of blue players are just going to transition to the new blue deck instead of playing with the current new blue deck. Um, but you may leave some stragglers along the way of people who are actually just playing Imperial because it's a budget deck and not because um, it's the best blue deck. Because right now it's both. Um, Yellow hybrid players are just going to play yellow hybrid, and green hybrid players get a good deck for once. So I get well. That's my last point. Is that any of you that still that think green hybrids better than tournament showings have proven outside of this one, please play it and try and prove me wrong because I need more people to beat in tournaments.
What he's saying is he's daring more green players to come out of the woodworks.
Oh yeah, honestly, like if I played green instead of Imperial, or if I played green instead of Mastamon, or instead of D Reaper, I'd win way more. So yeah, please
I would
please play
actually
green.
play green over the Reaper.
Probably, yeah. I don't know. It's
I
still
play I sleeved up D Reaper. I played it this weekend. I did okay with, or not like at my locals. I did okay with it. Obviously I lost to green, but it's not my cup of.
I don't know. Its worst hands are worse than I thought they would be from conception. But um yeah, that's all we have for this week. Those of you that stuck around, thanks. And we'll see you again next week. Goodbye.
Bye.